Still me. Good evening. I am Stephanie Ruhle. It is midnight on the East Coast, 9 p.m. in the West, and we are following breaking news on Capitol Hill. There is finally a deal in the Senate to fund the government. Friday morning, the House passed a $1.2 trillion government funding bill, which then went to the Senate for a vote. The Senate is still in session tonight. We're going to have more on that in a moment. There was also, no surprise, drama in the House today when far-right Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene filed a motion to remove Republican Speaker Mike Johnson. She made that move even as the House was voting on the spending bill, which she then voted against.
I am saying the clock has started. It's time for our conference to choose a new speaker. Mike Johnson, the Republican Speaker of the House, handed over every ounce of negotiating power to Chuck Schumer and the Democrats and went ahead and funded the government when this was our point of leverage.
Also, the Republican majority in the House became even narrower today. Congressman Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin, who already announced he was resigning, is headed for the exits earlier than expected. He is leaving Congress April 19th. That will bring the House GOP majority down to just one single vote, and that seat will be empty until November. With that, let's get smarter with the help of our lead-off panel, NBC senior national reporter Sahil Kapoor, John Allen, senior national politics reporter for NBC, former Democratic Congressman Conor Lamb, and former Republican Congressman Charlie Dent, both from the state of Pennsylvania. Sahil, set the stage for us. What is happening in the Senate as we speak?
Well, Stephanie, the Senate just began voting on this unanimous consent agreement that was locked in moments ago. We're expecting 6 roll call votes on Republican amendments. Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, said he wants them to be limited to 10 minutes. We'll see if that actually happens. It's very difficult to get senators to move that quickly on anything. And then after those are done, there are 3 voice votes on amendments as well, which are expected to be wrapped up instantly, and then final passage of the bill. So sometime in the next hour to 2 hours, probably, we should get this bill passed. It has already passed the House, as you just pointed out. Then it heads to President Biden's desk, who has said he will sign it. There will be a brief shutdown, but it'll be temporary. It'll be technical. It's not going to have any meaningful impact. For all intents and purposes, they have figured this out. They have ended this appropriations process 6 months after the fiscal year began. I've never seen anything quite like this. It took 4 stopgap bills and months of negotiating after the fiscal year had begun. And they've got the next fiscal year coming up in just 6 months, and they have barely even begun that process. So stay tuned for what comes next.
So when does this all wrap up? When are we going to have the vote complete?
Well, sometime in the next hour to 2. This really depends on how quickly senators are able to vote and to move through these amendments. So my guess is sometime in the next hour or so, hour to 2, they'll vote on final passage of the bill. Then it'll go to President Biden's desk, who has said he'll sign it. He has called on Congress to pass this quickly. Remember, Stephanie, they just released this bill yesterday. It's more than 1,000 pages. It spends more than $1 trillion. You know, you can understand why a lot of lawmakers had complaints about the process of how this came together. This is what happens, as I just told you recently, when you save things until the 11th hour to do your job.
Charlie, this whole thing is ridiculous, disappointing, pathetic. How is it that we are still doing this when it comes to keeping government running? I have said this 1,000 times. If this were any private business on planet Earth, the CEO would be ousted. They would be bankrupt, over, done with. But this is theoretically the most important business in America, our government.
Well, Stephanie, this all could have been wrapped up in December. And I mean that. They kicked this off into the new year because the speaker was worried about a rearguard action if he cut a deal with the Democrats, which he knew he was going to have to do to pass the appropriations bill. So that's why this thing has been kicked out to nearly East. It is not the way to run the railroad. I was on the Appropriations Committee for many years. I helped negotiate one of the spending bills. These things were ready. But again, it's all because of internal divisions within the House Republican Conference. They didn't want to face the reality of this inevitable bipartisan compromise with over 100 Republicans voting for it and a whole lot of Democrats voting for it in the House. Same thing's going to happen in the Senate. But it's because of fear. A lot of these members too many of these members don't want to govern. They don't think it's their responsibility. And so they want, many of them, by the way, they hope yes, then they vote no. They don't want the government to shut down, most of them. But they can't vote for a bill because they're afraid of some kind of a primary against them over, just doing their jobs.
Okay, then if doing your job and reaching across the aisle and working with someone from an opposing party is something that you're going to get in trouble for, Connor, are we going to get to a point where they can't pass anything?
Well, I just think we're going to get to the point where the Republicans won't be in the majority anymore. I mean, they're just discrediting themselves at every turn. Yeah, I mean, they might actually do it to themselves, which I don't think anyone really anticipated. But Charlie's right. The writing was on the wall for this thing for months. Everybody knew this was how it was going to end. It's amazing that Marjorie Taylor Greene is the one now calling for Mike Johnson's head, because she used to be for Kevin McCarthy, who was the one that did all these same spending bills to begin with, which got him fired. So now she's against the guy who was supposed to take, a harder line on spending bills. It's really just it's just mind blowing. And I don't have an answer for you because they don't have an answer for themselves. There's just no leadership there. There's a vacuum.
Okay, John, so Marjorie Taylor Greene is potentially looking to push out Mike Johnson, and Democrats like Tom Suozzi are saying, no, we want to be sure we protect him. What is going on, and specifically, what's Marjorie Taylor Greene up to, right? She doesn't have any independent thoughts. She does whatever Donald Trump tells her what to do.
She's certainly not going to do anything that is at odds with what Donald Trump wants, right? She's had some interest in the vice presidency, some interest in potentially a cabinet spot. She's very close to President Trump, or at least presents herself as such. So this is what she's up to, I think. I surmise, as the congressman pointed out a moment ago, she helped Kevin McCarthy. She got on the wrong side of the anti-government base of the Republican Party, and now she's doing some makeup. She wants to get rid of Mike Johnson. I think it's possible that there's a little bit of payback here for him, given that she was somebody who was so closely supportive of Kevin McCarthy. But at the end of the day, what you've got here, Stephanie, is a significant number of Republicans who aren't just in what Congressman Dent said about the hope yes, vote no caucus. There are members of Congress who have been sent here to oppose the government continuing to operate, right? There is no appropriations bill that they will ever vote for. There is no amount of clipping back spending that they can say, hey, that's acceptable because of this primary challenge, because of this fear. It used to be they were all hope yes, some voted no. Now there's a whole bunch of them, not the majority, but certainly enough of them with such thin majorities as you're talking about before with Mike Gallagher retiring, enough of them to throw sand in the gears every time legislation comes to the floor, and certainly every time it's about the government spending any money to continue functioning.
Charlie, do you agree with that chaos in the House on the Republican side is no accident? It's by design?
Well, yeah, there is an element, as John has pointed out. There is an element within the House Republican Conference that is what I would term as the rejectionist wing, these real hardliners who don't want to govern, who will never vote for an appropriations bill, who are never going to vote for this deal, but did everything they could to drag this thing out as far as they can. They make demands all the time. I want this. I want that. But at the end of the day, though, the way it works in Washington is those who are voting for the bills get to determine the content. But what's so screwed up in Washington is that there are these members out there who are making these ridiculous demands, and leadership listens to them and lets them help drive this process, even though they know they will not be part of the inevitable solution. Those types of people need to be marginalized and ignored, frankly, but they keep bringing them in. It didn't start with Mike Johnson. This has been going on for many years now in the conference, in the House Republican Conference, and it's really got to end. But those who vote for the bills determine the content, not those who are voting against the bills. Very simple.
Sahil, what reporting do you have about what's going on in the House?
Well, it's been a very bad day for House Republicans. Let's start with that. I mean, first off, you had a majority of... Hold on. Tell me when the last time you said it's been a very good day for House Republicans. Let me put it this way. I can't remember the last time they had this bad a day. It's been a very, very tumultuous and narrow majority, as I think all the guests on this panel will agree with. But today was unusual in the sense that it distilled all the fractures and the governing struggles and the infighting and the disenchantment among institutionalists like Mike Gallagher, who have decided at the age of 40, a rising star in the party, that he's done with this, that he's going to walk away. The fact that Ken Buck is leaving is indicative of the fact that, he's being pushed out because he demanded that party leaders stand up and emphatically reject the so-called big lie, the idea that the 2020 election was stolen. He wanted the next speaker after McCarthy was evicted to stand up and make clear that the 2020 election was legitimate, that Joe Biden won, Donald Trump lost. That didn't really sit well with his party. And from there, it became a downward spiral for him. So that's, again, part of what happened. And on the governing front, a majority of Republicans voted against this funding deal, which, as Connor correctly pointed out, is very much an extension of what Kevin McCarthy was doing. This was that top-line bill, that top-line spending deal that Kevin McCarthy struck all the way back then. There were 4 stopgap bills in the meantime. He lost his job for the first one of them. Mike Johnson did 3 more of them and didn't lose his job. There's a real reluctance, despite the recent activities of Marjorie Taylor Greene, among Republicans to actually remove the speaker because they saw what happened last time. They're deeply battle-scarred from it. They face an enormous amount of pushback. And what did they get out of it? You'd be hard-pressed to ask any of those 8 Republicans who evicted Kevin McCarthy to explain what they have gotten out of it. Most of them will tell you, like Chip Roy, for instance, who didn't vote to remove McCarthy, but he will tell you that they've gotten nothing out of it and nothing has really changed.
Connor, is there a way for Democrats, I can't even believe I'm asking this, to take advantage of the GOP's infighting?
Yeah, I mean, if by take advantage you mean just sort of do the job that they were elected to and get a few members to come over to their side to support some legislation, absolutely. I think that was much closer last time than anyone realizes. I know some Democrats personally that were in very close and involved talks with Republicans over funding for Ukraine and a couple other big priorities, if they were willing to sort of cooperate on the leadership fight last time. So it was extremely close, didn't quite get there. I think now that the Republicans have lost a couple of additional members and it's even closer and they're even more disgusted with their own side, absolutely. But I wouldn't call that taking advantage. I mean, I honestly think there's just a lot of people in the Democratic caucus that would like to do what they were sent there to do, which is pass some bills.
Okay, but what about, here's an analogy that I have been using today to describe this. Trump's followers, who are theoretically going to buy up the stock, hold it up for their trusted leader because they love this guy, is akin to his most devoted supporters storming the Capitol, going to jail while Trump watched, didn't pardon any of them, didn't cover their legal bills. And what did he do? He goes on throwing parties at Mar-a-Lago, running for president and living his life. So now here we are. They're going to buy up his shares, prop it up, and potentially he will then dump his shares into their laps and he'll keep on trucking with the dough.
Yeah, I saw you tweet about that earlier tonight, Stephanie. And, so basically what you're saying is it's Donald Trump business as usual. He's one.
Is that how you see this?
He's one lucky guy, because if this had not happened today, he'd be really in trouble come Monday. Now he can make a colorable argument, not a great one, but he can make a colorable argument that now he's got something worth $3 billion, maybe, that perhaps somebody will lend him something against, maybe one of his very wealthy friends, of which there are, a big handful who might be willing to do this for him. But as you said, Stephanie, this company has basically zero revenue, making tens of millions of dollars of losses. It's going to be a meme stock. If he goes to sell his stock, it's going to trade down dramatically, like most SPAC stocks do anyway. So I don't know anybody who's going to take this risk unless they just want to be in tight with Donald Trump.
Okay, but that's the thing. Ron, yes, he does know some really wealthy friends, but this company, all it is Donald Trump's post. Without them, there's nothing there. Like, is anyone paying attention to history repeating itself? The last time Trump had a publicly traded company, it failed spectacularly. It was a casino company, of course. And it even traded under the symbol DJT, which this will. Like, is anyone paying attention to this?
Oh, I know the story quite well, Stephanie. I covered it back when, and there was a now late analyst on Wall Street, Marvin Rothman, who had very negative things to say about the prospects for DJT. Donald Trump sued him. Marvin won the lawsuit and actually won enough money to go out and start his own business because he was right about what happened to DJT Enterprises, which was a series of casinos in Atlantic City. Very hard to lose money in that business. Donald Trump found a way to do it. In this case, as you say, I mean, is somebody willing to put up $500 million and take the risk that that's going to depreciate almost immediately once DJT goes public, particularly if they know at some juncture he's going to be selling shares? It's a tough call. Even billionaires don't like to lose $100 million or $200 million or $300 million. So they're going to have to really be comfortable taking that kind of risk.
Okay, but that's exactly the point. even billionaires, they became billionaires because they're smart, shrewd investors. Yeah. Bill, so if one were to do this, it would be public that they bought up these shares, that they then toppled in their face, or if they decided they were going to be the person that was going to put up the bond for Donald Trump. Wouldn't that cause so much scrutiny for this person? Wouldn't that have people wondering, what on earth do you need a potential next president to fix for you that you would do something like this?
Well, of course, Stephanie, it would raise those kinds of questions. That's why, you know, this is a very, very sketchy situation. But again, I get back to the fact that, you know, until today, like yesterday, he couldn't have offered this as a potential asset for somebody to lend against. Now, by some miracle of this shareholder vote today and potential waiver of the board letting him sell earlier than 6 months, he might actually be able to pull this off. He might be able to find somebody, this guy who owns 15% of TikTok, who's a big Donald Trump fan, might lend him $500 million against that DWAC SPAC stock. I wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it. And it'll certainly trade down, and it may not be a good investment, but, you know, that guy may not care.
And there are other ways to do it.
You're talking about the co-founder of Susquehanna, who is a huge investor in TikTok. Of course, Donald Trump said, I don't want to see TikTok getting banned. It all stinks to the high heavens. Do you think, Ron, this is the reason Donald Trump really hasn't returned to Twitter? Because his posts are the only thing keeping Truth Social afloat. And Truth Social is Trump's money ticket to get out of jail, theoretically, not literally, because we know jail could be pending.
It didn't really become actual money until the SPAC deal was closed, until the acquisition corporation and Donald Trump's Truth Social, the shareholders agreed to engage in the merger and go public. Had that not happened, had it been voted down, his shares would have been worthless. You know, there is one other way he can get money from this, which is an off-market transaction. If he were to find a willing buyer for 1/6 of his stake, $500 million versus the presumed $3 billion it's worth, you can do an off-market transaction and just sell it in a single block to someone else. Highly unlikely. There are ways for him to monetize this, but yeah, he is the only asset that Truth Social has, and from a business perspective, you know, I agree with Bill entirely. It's not a great proposition. Stock will probably trade down, but he might have just enough in the way of a stake in this company to get out of Dodge and pay that money that he needs to pay to the courts in the next several days.
It's a bad business move, so you'll have to wonder, why would someone do it? I'm out of time, but quickly, Bill, any shot Trump files for bankruptcy? He knows how to do that very well.
Well, he does. He's never filed for personal bankruptcy, as you know, Stephanie, as he's the first to point out. But until this merger was agreed to today, I would have bet he would be filing personal bankruptcy on Sunday night. Now I think he's going to announce some sort of deal on Sunday night. You know, he's Mr. Drama. He's going to do it on Sunday night just before everybody thinks he's going to not be able to pull this off.